Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 60 of a chronological walk through the Bible. And we're in the Gospel of John in the early aspects of Jesus' ministry. And you just can't even imagine what happens next. It gets very exciting. So yesterday, we talked about Jesus going postal in the temple. And he says, my Father's house should not be a house of trade. And later on, he says in Mark, my house shall be called a house of prayer. And he calls this my house, and it's his presence, his person, and respect for his person. As we remember, it's the location of the place of God, more centered on the earth. The most important nation, the most important city, the most important area, and the most important building. And Jesus basically says, I get to do what I want with this building. So the picture I thought of it today was, what if I decide to paint the temple yellow? Who gets the authority to do that? And that's what today's lesson, or little part of Scripture, is about, is who gets the authority to do with the temple what they want, and what gives you that authority. So here's the thing. This is John chapter 2, verse 17. And the disciples say, zeal for your house will consume me. So this is after he goes postal and gets the whip and everything. And then the Jews said to him, here's a great question. What sign do you show us for doing these things? In other words, what authorizes you to, get the whip out or paint the place yellow or do what you want with the place? And then Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it's taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days? Verse 21 explains, but he was speaking about the temple of his body. When therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had spoken this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. So a fantastic question today from the Jews. What authorizes you to do what you want with the temple? What makes you, gives you the authority to paint it yellow or call it what you want? And that is, they're asking the question is, who are you? And kind of snarkily, who do you think you are for doing this? And then they're saying, okay, well, prove it to us. What demonstrate that you will show us who you are, what you say you are? And then Jesus gives the answer. So the question is, what sign authorizes you to do whatever you want with the temple? And the answer that Jesus gives him is the resurrection. And the resurrection, this is kind of the be-all and the end-all sign from the Lord. And that's where he loosens the pangs of death, as it says in Acts. And he's raised by the glory and the demonstration of God, as it says in Romans. And here it says that I will raise myself up. So Scripture, if you look at who raised Jesus from the dead, the answer is the Father raised Jesus from the dead. And the Spirit raised Jesus from the dead. And Jesus raised Jesus from the dead. So it's kind of it's a different study than we're going to do today, but basically it's a whole Trinity party that's going on at the time of the resurrection. But throughout Jesus' ministry, he says, I am going to do signs which are going to demonstrate to you that I am a pretty special. First of all, I'm going to fix sicknesses. I'm going to physical sicknesses and blind people. I'm going to fix spiritual sicknesses and demon possession. And then I'm going to demonstrate my power over death by raising this poor guy Lazarus, who'd been in the grave for a couple of days. And then eventually then he raises himself. So he's going to demonstrate that the best sign of his authority is essentially the cross, the tomb, the suffering, and then the resurrection. If you want to find out more about that, listen to season 3, which is all about the resurrection week, the suffering week, the crucifixion week. All right, so in summary, what Jesus says is, I'm going postal on the temple, and I'm not going to use my words like you might tell a 2-year-old. I'm going to get the whip out because you're being disrespectful to the building, which is disrespectful for my father's house, which is disrespectful for my house, and I'm going to clean it out, give people access it, make it back to being a place of prayer, and I'm going to be zealous for my house. And who gives me the authority to do that? What gives me the authority to authorize this activity of, semi-violence? And here it is. It's the resurrection. So then the disciples, verse 22, they think back on this. When therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. So the disciples remember and believe. So my thought is of Jesus today is you can't get to Jesus, the real Jesus, without the resurrection. If your theology of Jesus ends at him being a nice guy or a good teacher or whatever, and not a death sufferer and resurrection doer, you can't get to the real Jesus. Now you can get to some sort of a fake Jesus, a half Jesus, without the cross and without remembering, you don't get to the real Jesus. So if you remember for the first time, I think we could call that belief. So let's believe, and if you've already believed, let's remember the things that he tells us, which is my resurrection is the thing that authorizes me to change the temple if I want and to be God. So it's this resurrection, it's the crucifixion, it's God demonstrating himself to us most clearly through the resurrection today. That's what gives him the authority. Thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.